Hello and welcome to our latest podcast in our Sustainability Perspective series, where we talk to a range of different packaging experts to learn more about how their company tackles the sustainability challenges the industry faces. My name is Elisabeth Skoda, and today I'm very pleased to welcome Jonathan Cage to the podcast. He's Director for Business Development at Impact Plastics. And Impact Plastics is the innovator behind XPP Polypropylene Solutions, which is a PS replacement solution for rigid thermoformed and form-fill-seal food packaging applications. I'll discuss with Jonathan the challenges and opportunities around developing recyclable solutions and switching to recyclable materials and replacing packaging materials with recyclable options, particularly also in the medical space. And we'll also take a detailed look at XPP Polypropylene solutions. So, welcome to the podcast, Jonathan. Looking forward to finding out more.
Thank you, Elisabeth. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Great. So, to get started, I wanted to get your opinion on what are some of the main challenges companies face around replacing traditionally used packaging materials with more recyclable options, particularly in the pharmaceutical and medical space?
Yes. I think there's quite a number of challenges on different levels. And it of course, starts with trying to understand what the package requirements are, what the material requirements are, what the performance requirements are. And that's basically where we start that process. And so by understanding those particular attributes and characteristics of the material, then you can start to explore other options, other material options, and maybe some other processing options, etc. And so that in itself, it has a lot of challenges associated with it. Then, of course, you have the investment, the costs, the capital investment to maybe modify equipment, et cetera, depending on what your process is. Especially in the medical field, if it's a thermoformed package or if it's run on a form-fill-seal piece of equipment, it's making sure that you don't compromise any of those characteristics or increasing cost, which is obviously paramount in many of these considerations. And so, there's a number of specific challenges that are going to be faced that need to be identified and then managed in order to understand what type of material or what materials you can actually look for as replacements to improve recyclability, simplify structures, but without compromising, again, the spend or the performance.
Yes, and we'll zoom into some of these issues a bit later in the podcast. But I wanted to ask you, how does Impact Plastics approach the development of recyclable solutions, both in terms of meeting sustainability goals and also in terms of functional performance?
Yes. So this is, one of our really core initiatives, and really began with XPP development. Is first of all, we looked for partners within the industry to expand some of the capabilities that we have within existing materials and XPP. And we can talk about that as a prime example of that. But for us, it's connecting with the right people within our customers' operations, whether it's packaging engineers. Primarily, that's where we start. And so, through those channels, we're able to really understand what the capabilities, the performance, the characteristics that we need to duplicate, essentially, when we're looking for recycled solutions or recyclable material solutions. And you can't compromise that. And then it's identifying what those kind of requirements are from a customer perspective. Which direction do you want to go to? Do you want to go into bioplastics? Do you want to go into recycled materials? Do you want to go into PCR, et cetera? And it's helping them achieve their sustainability goals through providing really solid solutions. And then as we have those discussions, then it's moving into more of an evaluation phase once we understand all of the critical process and the performance requirements of their packaging, then it's a matter of coming up with, okay, well, we've got these different solutions that we can provide to you, and here's how they would basically apply to your existing package, and to make sure that we give them options and have sort of transparency and discussions and understanding what those requirements are, and then matching those up with material replacement or improvements in recyclability.
I wanted to delve a bit deeper into when you have these conversations with the packaging companies.
Mhm.
What specific processing issues do they typically encounter when it comes to switching to recyclable materials?
Well, there's quite an array of challenges. First of all, is there any, especially in the medical field, are there any kind of sterilization requirements that the material has to go through? Does it go through autoclave or anything like that, which requires much higher heat requirements than maybe some of the other processes? So you've got to start with understanding what that looks like and how that could have an impact on different materials. Then it's understanding what process they're using. Are they using a thermoforming process platform? Are they doing form fill seal? And then it's making sure that you match up all of those performance requirements, whether it's the heat requirements, the shrink requirements, the forming requirements, etc., in order to make sure that you're not making huge changes to the existing package. And if there are changes or compromises or improvements, to make sure that the customer is along for that journey. So they really, you really want to be transparent. You want to have those open conversations to make sure that you're going down the right path. And then, of course, it's the addition of the cost implications, not only just from a material perspective, but then also, are there any compromises, modifications, et cetera, that are required to the equipment in order to run a sort of a different material? There are also other materials out there that could be sustainable solutions that could be more of a replacement option as well. And so there's quite a portfolio of kind of approaches that we can take to really understanding what the customer's needs are, and then matching that up with something that's more sustainable, that meets their sustainability goals.
Yes, and in that context, how does Impact Plastics XPP polypropylene solutions address some of the challenges that you just listed in
Sure.
your previous answer?
Yeah. So XPP has been a long journey. A colleague of mine and myself have actually been working on XPP or a PS replacement for about the last 10 plus years. And then when we are here at Impact Plastics, that's when we really discovered the potential for PS replacement with a polypropylene. So just to back up a little bit, PS has come under tremendous fire and pressure. Yeah, it's being replaced globally from a number of concerns with the monomer, Prop 65, etc. But it's an incredible material. It's kind of like PVC of the 70s and 80s. It was incredible material, but you really shouldn't be putting food, etc., into PVC. Similarly, that's where polystyrene is now moving. And so for us, XPP is a brand new polypropylene that we've developed over the last 5 years that really replicates the characteristics of polystyrene. And so the implications of that are, now you can actually take a polypropylene, which traditionally has a very high shrink rate. It's unstable through the forming process, which you have a lot of controls in thermoforming. But when it comes to form fill seal platforms, polystyrene has a very wide process window. Polypropylene generally doesn't run on it. But XPP, what we've been able to do is replicate the stiffness, the shrink, the formability of polypropylene as a true PS replacement.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you a bit more about the key properties of
Yeah,
XPP, and you've already talked a bit about that, but would you like to expand on that a little bit further
love
for
to.
our listeners?
Yeah, so there's some inherent characteristics of polypropylene. Polypropylene to me has been an amazing material. When I started my career in plastics and rigid packaging, just sort of like around Neanderthal man and dinosaurs were roaming the earth. But polypropylene to me is an amazing material. It's got incredible taste and odor, organoleptic properties. It's from a recyclability perspective, you can put a barrier in it. So it could be a BUH probe, for instance, or something along those lines, and it gets fully recycled. It could be opaque and it's fully recycled. So there's a lot of carried, and also the specific gravity is 0.9. So it's actually, you gain a yield gain of about 12% moving from a styrene to polypropylene. And then, if you look at that versus polyesters, you get about a 30% improvement in yield, because this actually can also be a option if customers are considering polyester versus polystyrene. Polypropylene, because of the specific gravity, because of the recyclability characteristics of it, again, if it's opaque or if it's got a barrier, it's still fully recyclable. Whereas the other materials, if you laminate or you color PET, it does not get recycled. Polystyrene is fully recyclable, but it's just the infrastructure is not there currently. It's getting a little bit better in Europe to recycle it, but we don't have the volume that we need to get through the MRFs and et cetera. So from a properties perspective, what we've really been able to do is to duplicate those polystyrene characteristics. So similar flex modulus stiffness, very similar shrink characteristics, lower rheology and forming temperature, so you need less calories. And again, this is a brand new polypropylene. This is not like anything that's out on the market today. And so with those characteristics of XPP, that enables us to run on horizontal formful seal platforms, for instance, for yogurt pots or creamers or pudding, etc.
I wanted to ask you about the compatibility. And so you say it's fully compatible with existing thermoforming and form-fill seal systems and processes. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. It's interesting because we extrude polyester, we extrude polystyrene, polypropylene, and so we're sort of a material agnostic. And for us, it was like, okay, well, let's look and see what's going to work on the form-fill seal platform. But when we started digging into it, the capital investment to modify an existing piece of form-fill seal equipment to run polyester, because you need the additional tonnage at the cutting stations on the ship, was pretty steep, somewhere around €1 million. And so that's like, okay, if you take some of the large brand owners that are out there that could have 100, 200 machines globally, that's a huge investment. And so what we were able to do with XPP is considerably lower that, to the point where, we may need new plugs, or, something along those lines, or, depending on the age of the equipment, some of the heating characteristics. So that's what really drove us towards more of a polypropylene solution. And also it was really to try and simplify a lot of the structures that were out there today, with the characteristics that we've been able to develop with XPP, and remain very competitive, right? So you've got to be competitive, because it's going to go from the packaging engineer where we started off, and then it's sort of going to go into the sourcing and supply chain. And you have to be realistic. That's I think some of the prior challenges was the access to solutions that were both economical and met sustainability objectives.
I was wondering, do you have maybe a couple of examples of where companies switched to XPP, and could you talk us a bit through their transition to the new material?
Yes, I can. So for instance, we have, let's go back to thermoforming rather than form-fill seal. But on the thermoforming side, there's companies out there that have a lot of polystyrene tooling. And again, that sort of comes down to the capital investment. And so in this case, the customer was looking to use their existing tooling but move into a different material. And so that's where XPP played a really important role for this particular snack tray, was the ability to actually run XPP in a polystyrene tool. And so we went through all of the reiterations and testing on that with XPP formulations, in order to make sure that we met all of their requirements. And we can customize XPP. So that makes it, so we can add copolymers to it for a cold impact, or we can increase the stiffness, et cetera. And so from that perspective, it was moving through the process to start off with the existing polystyrene package, and then move through the thermoforming, and then also into the trimming, and then also to the filling. So, both in medical and in food, where you've got automatic filling systems, deposit, fill, seal, etc. It's critical that tray, once it's gone through the forming process, still fits within the carrier plates. And so we were able to achieve all of that with XPP as a replacement for the existing PS tray.
And to wrap up our conversation today, I wanted to zoom out a little bit and wanted to ask you, how do you see the industry evolving in the coming years in terms of recyclable packaging for pharmaceutical applications in particular?
Well, I think that some of the biggest challenges that we have, and I think that this applies very much so to institutional type packaging, both on the medical side, on the food side, but on the medical side, especially, it's trying to make sure that we have products and materials that we are offering to our medical customers that are going to be sustainable, that are going to be able to be recycled. Because I think that as the infrastructure is building within hospitals, hotels, venues, etc., the ability to collect that material and then send that for sorting so that it could be recycled, probably into a different application or something like that. But there's still, you've got to be able to extract that value. So again, it's coming up with the right solution, not only that meets those sustainability objectives, but then also does it so that you take into consideration the entire sort of process from the initial sourcing of the material to making sure that you can obtain it on a consistent basis and that it's available. For instance, if you look at PCRs today, etc., you've got to make sure that you match up what those material requirements are, and that you have a reliable source that you can always pull from to get those particular resins. And so I think simplification, education, and putting the right process in place to take advantage of some of the sustainable solutions that we have today, and then apply those to the customer's packaging.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Jonathan. So yeah, that brings us to the end of today's podcast, and just leaves me to say thank you very much for being here and for sharing your insights about XPP and generally recyclable plastics.
It's been a pleasure, Elisabeth, and really do appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and talk about XPP and our recyclable solutions.
You're most welcome. And yeah, if you'd like to learn more about XPP, Impact Plastics will be exhibiting at Packaging Europe's Sustainable Packaging Summit, which takes place in Amsterdam on November 12th and 13th. We have an exclusive 10% discount for our podcast listeners. If you'd like to get some tickets, you can use the code PEPOD10. That's PEPOD10. For more information and tickets, head to packagingsummit.earth/2024. We look forward to seeing you there. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.